So Azure, how many people have actually worked with Azure? A couple of you, okay. What about AWS? Just a couple as well, okay. So I'm going to talk a lot about the cloud in general, and I'll give you some background info in general on the cloud too, because it sounds like a lot of you haven't worked with. Has anyone who hasn't worked with any clouds so far? Okay, yourself. All right. So I'll go over things in general, but just so you know, Azure. I get a lot of questions. In fact, at Java 1, I still had people asking me, do you guys just rent space from AWS, like everyone else, or, and no, we're really serious about our cloud. We have our own cloud venues. Let me show you Azure regions. Let's see here. So we have right now, and I always like to check this live because we have, let's see, 36 regions with 6 planned. And what I mean by regions is it's a location. So Azure is in each one of these locations. We call them regions. But we don't call them locations. We call them regions because there's multiple buildings in each region. And those buildings can be a few miles apart. They can be quite far apart. But each location generally has 3 different buildings. And when you take a photo and put it on the cloud, it's usually put in 3 different places in a server, and then that server is actually backed up in 3 different locations in one region as well. And then you can actually back things up between different regions too. So these are the listings of the regions we have for now. And as you can see, quite a few, and then we have these things in blue are the ones that are planned. So those are, we're working on South Africa, Australia, let's see, a couple dedicated in France, and some others. And I always check back here because this changes all the time. So that's the first thing I want to let you know. And the other thing is, we have the most certifications of anyone. Microsoft legal department has always been really good at certifications, and we participate in a lot of standards and certification processes. So, we have more than anyone else. Actually, I should also say with the regions, this is more than any other cloud combined. So if you add all the locations that Azure has and all the locations that Google has, it still doesn't add up to how many locations we have around the world. So it's a serious, big cloud platform. We've invested billions of dollars in it, and we continue to invest constantly in it. A while ago, Canada, for example, we came online in Canada and we ran out of space almost immediately. And so we actually have to add more capacity there as well. So it's the cloud is really crazy. It's a huge business, and it's a huge part of Microsoft now. It's the biggest growing part of Microsoft, including open source and Linux. So Linux, I think the last numbers I heard, and these are probably wrong by now, is 30 to 40% of our VMs, our virtual machines that run on Azure, are running Linux. And it represents even larger by volume and by storage, and not just by the counts of VMs. So we have a ton of activity going on. Another question I had at Java 1 recently was, isn't this some kind of trick, you guys using Linux, and you're going to try and destroy it later? No, it's a big part of our business. And if we destroy, if we did something to harm Linux or the open source world, we're actually harming our own business now. It's the biggest, fastest growing part of our business, and we're not going to do anything to harm it. So, another thing I want to mention, 90% of the Fortune 500 use Azure, and that's growing all the time. And so our competitors, Amazon invented this space, so kudos to them, but they have mostly startups who use it, and they are making headways in the big companies, but we really have the large companies. And the reason why I bring that up is we have a lot of users who give us feedback, and so we are learning when we work with these large companies how to actually make a cloud that works for them.
Hey, are you enjoying our video? Excellent. In 2006, we set out to get all the Java community to come together to talk about the language they love. The Dublin Java user group was born. From humble beginnings with pub meetups, we now bring in Java RockStars and Java Champions to Dublin every month. With the knowledge they share, these are the guys that want to help you enrich your working life. So sit back, listen in, and study those slides carefully. They are full of gems. By the end of this video, if you've learned something fabulous or have ignited just one great idea, go straight to your boss and demand a DubJug membership. Just imagine what it would be like for you to be networking and sharing great ideas with 40 other Java developers at our next event.
So it's a serious business, and it's very serious. The way we're building it is for big companies as well as small companies. But if we can make it work for huge companies that have millions of transactions a day, then obviously a startup can use our stuff as well, and it's going to be good capacity and it's going to run well. So for the agenda today, I'm going to talk about platform and deployment options. So mainly, most people I talk to in the Java world have seen enough Java. They have a good handle on the code that they already use. And what I'm going to talk about is how do you actually get that code onto the cloud? So I'm going to talk about virtual machines, containers, and our software as a service options, which we call app services or web apps. And I'll explain a little bit about what we offer in each of those. And then I'm going to talk about, once you've got your code on the cloud, what can you do with that code? We have SDKs and tools to scale your code and add new features and enhance the apps that you already have. And those, by the way, you can use those from on-prem as well, or you can put your code on the cloud and then enhance it. And I'll talk about that and some more resources, and then we'll have some questions. So provisioning. We have 3 ways basically to provision things. We have a portal. How many people have used the Azure portal or seen it? A couple? Okay, so I'll show that to you. Then we have the Azure CLI, which is our command line interface. And that works with Windows, Mac, and Linux. You can run it. It's compatible with Bash. You can get things with grep or normal commands to actually return things. Now I'll show you a little example of that as well. And then we have this other thing that's more complicated called templates, which is ARM templates, Azure Resource Manager, ARM templates. And basically what that does is it allows you to script some really complicated deployment options out to the cloud. And we work with Chef, Puppet, and all the major DevOps tools as well. We have plugins and tools that use all of those as well. So let me just give you a quick tour now of this. So here's the Azure portal. This is my portal. And I've got a bunch of things in here. If I want to create something new, like I want to create a new VM or a software as a service app or something like that, I can just say new and then go Java. And if I just search Java, so this is our marketplace, which is the Azure Marketplace. We have a bunch of partner things in here, and then we have a bunch of things that we've actually built as well. So here's what it looks like when you look in the marketplace for Java. There's this thing called the Java Coffee Shop, which is it's a web app. Over here on the right where it says web and mobile, that means it's a web app. And the Java Coffee Shop is basically this silly little WAR file that we have. And it just it's a good example of how you can quickly create a Java application on the cloud. This is the easiest way to do it. So if I click here and I say create, and then if I call this DubJug, and I choose my subscription here. Now every single application that you run on Azure has to have a resource group. So the resource groups are something that's just a way of tagging your group of things that work together. So let's say you have in this case you just got one thing, but typically you'd have a backend database, you'd have a Tomcat web server, and you might have some other things like load balancers and things, all running in one place. You can actually group those together in a resource group and then manage them that way. You can get billing information for that. You can get You can delete it, you can move it to another location, things like that. So all kinds of things you can do with the resource groups, but you have to create one with every Azure location. Then if I say app service plan location, basically this is a default plan. And you know, I showed you all the locations we have. In this case, it's just a South Central US location. And if I want to do some telemetry tracking on this application, I just turn on Application Insights and it asks me for a key, and I'll go into what that is in a little bit. But if I say pin to dashboard, so basically I just had to name it, and I click the pin to dashboard and I say create, and what it's going to do is it's going to go off, hopefully. There it is up there, it's working away, there we go. Now if I go over to the right, I think there it is. So this is deploying the Java Coffee Shop app. So this is, it starts up a Tomcat application service. So Tomcat, Java are already pre-made in this application service. And then it's going to have this WAR file that's built in. And this is just a pre-made image. And I'll get back to that in a second. The other thing I want to show you is a CLI. So we have the Azure CLI, which is basically AZ. So the Azure CLI has a way of controlling all kinds of things on Azure. And the nice thing about it is you can script it. So if you already have a lot of investment in shell scripts, for example, or in PowerShell or in batch files, in the case of Windows, you can actually use this for adding new scripts. So let's say you want to create a virtual machine and you want to contain, you want to have a virtual machine, you want to have a certain IP address that's public, and you want to have some network services like a load balancer or something. You can do that all through scripts, and I'll show you some examples of this in a minute.
Hi there, John Bulger here from Version 1, an IT consulting firm that grew from 2 people back in 1996 to over 1,000 people today, with 100 Java developers alone. Core values is something that we take very seriously in Version 1, and is ingrained into every decision we make and into our culture. If core values and strong principles is something that interests you, then we would love to hear from you. You can find our website at www.version1.com. Enjoy the rest of the video.
Of how you actually create a VM and then get some code out onto it. But you can do that all through the CLI. And this works with, it works here in, this is a Windows command prompt, so that's no surprise really with Windows. But also we have Bash on Windows. Who's used Bash on Windows or heard of it? Okay, so there's this thing called the Windows Subsystem for Linux, which is a confusing name for Bash on Windows. And basically, it's the same thing. You have the Azure CLI based on that. You also have grep. You have Cloud Foundry built into this, tmux, all kinds of things. So you can install, if you have Windows 10 or if you have Mac or Linux, you can install the Azure CLI on top of this. And if I want to update this, in fact, it didn't tell me this time, but I do. This is Ubuntu Linux. That's what it is. If I want to grab something like an OpenJDK and put it on my machine, I use apt-get to get it. But this is sort of sandboxed in Azure. The other cool thing I'll show you. So that's the command prompt. Also, we have this. The other cool thing. Let me see here. Okay. So this is the, let me get back to what I created a while ago. It was just provisioning while we were talking. So this is the coffee shop. So it actually finished running and it opened for me. And it's going to fire up any second now. When I was in the portal, what it does is it created the app called DubJug for me. It's an app service. And when I click here on dubjug.azurewebsites.net, whoops, it's taking a while. The first time it fires up, sometimes it takes a couple minutes. So let's get back to that. The other thing I want to show you here is you don't need to install anything on your local machine if you don't want to. All you need is an Azure subscription. There's a little thing here up on the top right where my mouse is right now called Cloud Shell. If I click this, you can actually access from inside the portal the CLI. What it's doing is requesting a Cloud Shell. This is a container, so it fires up a Docker container, and the Docker container contains the Azure CLI. It's running on Linux, Ubuntu Linux actually. It contains kube control for Kubernetes, the Azure CLI, tmux, Cloud Foundry CLI, all kinds of things. I don't know. I'm going to blame the Wi-Fi. This is a little slow. Normally, you just say requesting a Cloud Shell, it would have been running by now. Let's go back here. Maybe it's because I got this coffee shop firing up. There you go. So just hopping back here for a second. So this is the website that I created, and I can create, if I want to order a Americano, I can just click here, and you put in your email address, and you can place the order for the Americano. I think it's not going to check my address actually. So it's just a silly little app. It's a WAR file. But the idea here is now that I have this web app set up, I can use FTP or a few other things to drop my own WAR file in there. This is a Tomcat application server with Java running already. So it's just an easy way to do that. All right. So this is already set up. So that's the web app I created through the portal. Now I've got the shell here. And the shell I can actually, as I showed you on my local machine, I've got Azure CLI here. I've got Cloud Foundry. I've got kube control.
I'm Catherine Askell, the founder of GuruTeam. GuruTeam specializes in delivering high-end ICT technical training and consultancy services. What makes us different is that we employ the creme de la creme of specialist instructors who have vast real-world experience and passion for the technologies they teach. With a continually evolving portfolio of over 250 courses, we can customize a program to suit your team. We have one of the largest portfolio of cloud, Linux and development courses in Ireland, and have several accreditations including the Linux Foundation, LPI and the DevOps Institute. We would be delighted to talk with you about working with your teams, so please visit our website on www.guruteamirl.com.
A few other things if you're working with Kubernetes. Everything's built in here. So this is an image that we maintain. And when I clicked here on this little icon, what it did is it went out to a storage on Azure. It went out to a storage account, and it grabbed a container that everyone has access to. And that container contains all of these CLI tools in it. Now, one of the cool things is there's good and bad things about this CLI through the portal. The first thing that's good is it automatically logged me into my account because it knows who I am because I'm in the portal already. It logged me into my Azure CLI account. So let me see here, AZ account list. So you can see this here. Oh. Table. Let's do a table. So you can see all the subscriptions I have here and the things you can use to work with them. This is the one I use all the time, and then I've got all these other ones that I don't use all that much. But the point is here that I'm already logged in. As you can see here, the default is already set. So I can just start working with my account. If I create a VM right now, if I say AZ VM create, okay, so AZ VM create, no. Create, there we go. So there's all kinds of syntax I can use to create a VM and set up all kinds of things inside there, but it's all ready to use. So if I say AZ VM create and actually create a VM, it's going to go into my subscription and be set up for me, which is kind of nice. The other thing I was going to show you, we don't have it set up right now because we're using the Chromecast, but there's an Azure app as well. And the Azure app, I already fired it up. So everyone can see this at the back. So it actually has a Cloud Shell built into it as well, which is kind of cool. I didn't do it today, but the other day I used this. I went out and did a git fetch, because Git is built into the Cloud Shell. Did a git fetch on a GitHub repo. I brought that, actually no, first I created a VM. I opened port 8080. I went out and I got, using apt-get on that VM because I created an Ubuntu VM, I went out and I got an OpenJDK and a couple other tools I needed, Maven, some other things. Then I downloaded the Git, the actual code from a Git repo, and then I ran Maven on it and fired it up, and I could actually do all that from my phone on a plane. So that was kind of cool. You can do that. So the Azure app does that, and it gives you a lot of the functionality that you already have in the portal, but it's on your phone. So it's more than a gimmick. I thought it was kind of a gimmick when I first saw it. It's like, yeah, okay, you can do it on my phone, but actually you can do a lot with it. The only things you can't do is you can't copy things from your local machine, or in this case, your local phone, out to the cloud. And SSH keys don't get stored. And I'll show you what that means in a minute too. So that's a little tour of the Azure CLI. You can get it on your local machine if you're using Windows, through the command prompt. You can get it on Windows, Mac, or Linux. You can also get it through the Windows subsystem for Linux as well, and on your phone. So let's talk about VMs then. So there's many ways to get started with VMs. I showed you the marketplace. Let's go back there for a second. So when I say new, Java, so I showed you a web app. That was that coffee shop app that's running now. But if you look through some of these other things beyond that web app, where it says compute on the right here, this actually is a VM. It's a VM template that's already been created. It's what's called a virtual hard drive, so a VHD file. And Bitnami actually creates a lot of these for us. So Bitnami has some. Jelastic, we're a partner of them. Jelastic created their own VHDs. Let's see, Azul. So Azul, who creates an OpenJDK. We have VMs already pre-made for that. But the idea here is you can create your own VHDs as well. So let's say you want to have a specific version of Tomcat, and then a customized version of a JVM and 6 other things. You can actually create a VHD file. It's pretty easy to do. You can look it up online, a Hyper-V file. You can set up something locally, generate a VHD file, put that into storage, and then you can access that VHD file and deploy it out to Azure as well. So your code can already be in that VHD file, and you just fire it up as a VM. It's kind of a cool way to go. But this is some examples of ones. If you want to use WebSphere, for example, we actually have, this one's created by a company called Midvision, but we also have IBM official versions of Oracle, WebLogic, WebSphere from IBM, Jetty, all kinds of app servers and things that are already created in VMs. So what can you do with a VM once you've got it created and deployed? One of the things that I want to make sure you know, I mentioned this earlier, but when you create a VM on Azure, it gets put into an availability set. So your VM itself, this is your VM, there's 3 of them here, automatically by default at a certain level, when you're using a lower tier, but if you use a standard level of virtual machines, it automatically creates 3 instances.
Jerry Nolan here from Stack & Co. When you want to change your job, you'll want to make a move which will give you career growth, interesting projects, and a fresh challenge. At Stack & Co, we can help you make that career enriching move by taking the time to really understand your individual interest and what represents the best next step for you. Let's have a confidential conversation to discover your career enriching move. Contact me on www.stackand.co.
Of that virtual machine in 3 different locations. And that way, if one VM goes down, you still have 2 others, and or if you want to update your VMs, you can do them one at a time, and no one's going to notice because the other 2 VMs will still be running. So you can have load balancing, and by the way, you can use a lot more than just 3. So availability sets are something that happens behind the scenes. You don't need to do anything. But we also have these things called scale sets. You can create up to 1,000 VMs in a scale set, and that can be auto-scaled. So you can set up a VM, you have a VM scale set here, a load balancer in the front with a public IP address, and that public IP address is the only thing that people need to know about. And behind the scenes, you can have 1,000 VMs running that actually handle your structure. Now, you don't actually have to create the VMs all at once, but I showed you the CLI before. So I said AZ VM create. There's also a VMSS, VM scale sets create through the CLI. So AZ VM scale set create, and then you have your resource group, you name it, your big cluster of VMs. You can have an Ubuntu image here, and you can say instance count 1000. A load balancer is just going to be the default load balancer, and then you have a prefix for your for the subnet if you want one. That's an option that you don't actually need to add. So this is just an example of what you can do. So with this script, you can create 1,000 VMs in a scalable scale set on Azure. Now, you don't have to create all 1,000. We also have these auto scale rules for VM scale sets. So the idea here is, let's say you create 10 VMs, and then you want to make sure that it scales if you start to run out of space on those 10 VMs. Those are load balanced VMs. There's different settings you can use for this through the Azure Management Portal. In this case, this example is it's going to scale up to 10 maximum VMs, and it's going to have a minimum of 1 VM. And let's say your first VM is going to be out there. If it goes over 75% CPU usage, then it's going to generate another VM, and it's going to have all your code ready to go on it. You can actually scale that, and then if those 2 VMs are hitting 75%, a third one will be created up until 10. Now, if traffic gets light again, if it goes below 25%, the scale will shut down 1 or more of those VMs as things start to get less busy. So it's kind of cool. VM scale sets, they're there to make sure that you don't lose any traffic, but also they'll save you money because you can scale down again automatically. So the other thing I want to talk about a little bit is just failure domains. So we have a lot of different things happening behind the scenes for these VM scale sets and VMs in general. We have fault domains, which just makes sure that there's isolated servers, power units, and rack routers on all of our servers in the cloud. And it automatically manages all this for you, just to know that you've got this kind of facility behind the scenes. And then I want to show you this. The reason why I want to show you this right now, it's sort of hopping forward a little bit, or moving from scale sets to a service. But we have a MySQL as a service and a Postgres service as well now on Azure. And these are scalable in a similar way that you have the VMs, where you can set your capacity quite low, and then when you run over a certain capacity, it will expand that capacity for you, and you only get billed for the stuff you use, and then it will scale back as you don't. And the reason why I want to show you that was I've got an app example that I want to bring up. And so what I wanted to do, because how many people here are familiar with, how many people use Bash and shell scripts on a regular basis? Okay, a few of you, okay. So generally, we have a ton of tools that you can use to get your code out to web apps, virtual machines, and I'm going to talk about containers a little bit later as well. But the whole idea here is you can create these virtual machines, these virtual machine scale sets and the web apps, but how do you actually get the code onto them?
Equifax is a great place to work for, especially to develop your skill set as a developer. The company culture and the office atmosphere and the location are all perfect. A lot of our projects actually focus on big data and the cloud, so we use a lot of cutting edge technologies in our projects. So you'd see things like Java 9, Angular 2, AWS, Docker, and recently the ELK stack. You're constantly working on projects and products that are actively used every day, so that you know that your work actually means something. So if you'd like to learn more, get in touch and log on to equifax.com.
And I wanted to create an example of building that code without actually using any special tools. So there's nothing you need to install. So what I did is I just used standard bash tools, and let me go in and I'll show you what I did. So this is a script. It's actually just a script for my own purpose here, but I want to show it for a demo. And then, by the way, this is Visual Studio Code. How many people have heard of Visual Studio Code? Okay, so it's a text editor. It's Atom based, and it's free. It runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux, and it's extremely popular right now. I think we have over 1 million downloads. Let me see here. Visual. And don't be thrown by the name, by the way. It's not a Visual Studio product from the Visual Studio family. It's just for some reason, I don't know why, but they named it Visual Studio. Yeah, it causes me problems all the time. But it's a great tool, and it's not part of the Visual Studio family. It has a ton of plugins. Google uses it for Go. So it's actually the most popular Go editor if you use the Go language. The most popular Go editor is Visual Studio Code. You can download it for Windows, Mac, or Linux, and it has a ton of plugins, extensions we call them. And these extensions are pretty cool. Like I say, it's all free, and it's actually a pretty handy tool. And slow, apparently. There we go. So Git, there's all kinds of add-ins and tools. We use it a lot for writing our own docs at Microsoft. So docs at Microsoft are actually all written mostly in Markdown, and they're all out on GitHub. And by the way, you can go into pretty much any doc on docs.microsoft.com. If you see an issue or you have a problem with it or you want to enhance it, you can actually click on, there's an edit button you can click on, and you can report issues, you can send pull requests, whatever you want to do with it. So it's kind of cool, but we use Visual Studio Code to write those docs in most cases, using Markdown and a few plugins that we've created. So anyway, that's Visual Studio Code. This is a script that I put together. It uses this. So I started with this application called Spring Boot to Do. It's a Spring Boot application. It's a really simple application. It's a to-do application, and it writes data to a back end. Originally, it was in Cosmos DB, which I'll get to in a little bit. It's like a MongoDB compatible service. But in this case, what I did is that I adapted it for the MySQL service that I showed you earlier. That's why I brought it up. You just go through application properties to do that. And so I got that running on my local machine. It uses Maven, so you just say Maven package Spring Boot run, and it runs on my local machine. And then what I had to do is go into the portal. Let's go back to the portal here. And in the portal, get back over there. There we go. Here it is. So this is the Azure database for MySQL that I had to create. It's called BB MySQL Demo. And if I go to connection security, one of the things I have to do if I'm running this on my local machine is just click on add my IP, and it adds the IP address for this location into the app, and then I say save. I won't do that right now, but if I say save here, it's going to reboot the app with the new IP address, so an allowable IP address. You have to have a whitelist by minimum to get into this, and we also have SSL enabled. So it's a secure MySQL app, and basically what you do is I went into my app from GitHub, I downloaded it, I added an application properties file, I changed the connection string that used to go to MongoDB, I changed it to MySQL, and I changed a few other things in the code, just very small things. And now it's got a MySQL backend. And then I went into the application and set it up so it works with the MySQL service that I already created. There's some application properties there I won't show you that give you access to the database through some connection strings.
Hi, my name is George, and I'm a Scrum Master at the Equifax R&D Centre here in Dublin. We focus on innovation and collaboration and have a fast-paced, team-driven environment where everyone is a key contributor to high-priority initiatives. We have a very healthy and vibrant agile development community where there is a focus on automation and CI/CD to ensure that the highest standards of quality are maintained. If you would like to learn more about us, please get in touch through our website, which is equifax.com.
And then the other thing I had to do was, once I got it running locally, is deploy it to a virtual machine. So I'll show you how to do that. So to run this, you just say Java jar to do, And then I went into the CLI that I showed you. AZ login allows me to log into my account. And I already did all this part before I got here because it takes a while. So AZ group create. So as I mentioned, you have to create a resource group. So I created a resource group called BB MySQL VM demo. And then I created the VM. AZ VM create and the name of the VM right there, BB MySQL VM demo 1. I always name them like that in case I want to add more VMs later to a scale set. And then BB SQL My VM or BB SQL VM demo is the resource group. The location that I want to put, one of the regions that we have out there, East US 2. And then this is a key command here, generate SSH key. And then I want to use a special image. So we have an Ubuntu, very specific Ubuntu server image out on Windows, 16.04. And it's the 2017-02-24 release. I just used that because it was the one that was available. The most recent version of the Ubuntu server that we have out there. So when I say AZ VM create, it comes back and it returns the public IP address and a few other things. So here's the IP address I can use for that. And it actually downloads, because I said generate SSH key, it actually downloads an SSH key onto my local machine when it creates that. So now I can securely access that VM without having to do any login or anything like that. One other thing I had to do is open port 8080 because it's a Spring Boot application. By default, they run on 8080. And then I say, if I want to get the IP address, it's here when you create it. But if you want to get it later, you say azvm list, and then I can go here. Now I can start showing you some of these commands, and these work on the Windows subsystem for Linux or.
How do you handle authentication in the CLI?
With the CLI, in this case, with SSH. So it automatically generated a SSH key and placed it onto my local machine. So I don't actually need to get that. Let me see, for some reason this didn't copy. Copy.
PowerShell, you get the pop-up and you have to fill in your username and password.
Yeah, well, to access my account on Azure, I had to do that. And I did that before I got here, before you guys, saw. Because it's kind of a tedious process. But yeah, basically I did have a login in my account, but then once I do that, then creating the VM with the generated SSH key will automatically download the SSH for me. I don't need to log in again.
Hi there, it's Sergio Dobrovolsky here from Version 1, an IT consulting company that has a main focus on innovation. We believe that innovation is a key factor in being successful. That's why we created an innovation lab, a place where we can experiment, try new technologies, express ourselves, so in order to bring more value as possible to the company and to the community as well. If you're looking for new challenges and if you want to experiment the innovation with us, don't be shy and come and talk to us.
So I'll show you an example of that in a minute. So here's the BB MySQL demo. Out table TSV. So TSV is going to give me a little more detail than this does, and in this case it's going to give me the IP address, I hope. Anyway, didn't give me the IP address, but I already have it. So let me show you what else I had to do. So the next thing I do is I just say SSH Benz. So in this same window, Benz is my admin name, and the IP address. Now, if you guys try to do this, it'll fail. But for me, it lets me go right in because I already have the SSH key installed on my local machine. So from there, I did an apt-get update and an apt-get install of OpenJDK, which I already did. And then I can just list the files. So when you're working with Windows Subsystem for Linux, you can mount your local machine hard drive. In this case, I mounted CUsers, Benz document, GitHub, Spring Boot to do, which is the file where the jar file is going to be. And then I did a secure copy, SCP. I copied that WAR file to the IP address there. And then basically I go to the portal again. If I run Java jar, right from here. It's going to fire up Spring. I already did all that part. So I showed you the copying and all that stuff. I already did it. It takes a few minutes. Now once that's done, I can just SSH into this VM. I can fire up this. There you go. So it's running now. So then if I click on this, yesterday I tried this, and the security of the place that I was doing my talk captured it and said this is an unauthorized website and we can't let you see it. But today we got it. So so I can enter a task here, speak at Dobjug, and then is speaking. And then I say add task, and it automatically writes to my MySQL database on the back end. Hopefully, oh, there it is. Yeah, so I did it twice now. But yeah, so basically it just writes to MySQL database on the back end. And that's how you actually get your code out to the cloud. Now there's a few other things I can do because it's all built in. I can use a tmux to actually persist that application. Right now, if I shut this down, if I do this, so it shuts it down, and the app won't actually work anymore. But yeah, I can run tmux and just leave that running on the VM if I wanted to. Yeah, so anyway, that's a demo of how you actually get your code out to the cloud on a virtual machine. That's, you know, there's two ways you can do it, you know, through FTP or something like that, or you can just use the CLI like this. And you can create a script if you're using the CLI that just runs and does all this for you. It goes out to the server, SSH, and then you can drop another script that actually goes and gets apt-get for all the things you need to run on that VM and fires up the jar for you. So that's kind of an easy way to do it as well. You don't have to do it manually the way I did. So that's it. Hey.
Well, what did you think of that? I really hope that you enjoyed it. Just remember, if you want to become a member of the Dublin Java user group, all it costs is €75. €75 gets you the entry for 10 events. It doesn't have to be the next 10 events. It could be 10 events over 3 years, but it lasts for 10 events. It's superb value to see all these guys in Dublin